Hi, everyone. My name is Anna, and I've got my partner in crime, Jim Ludwig, and this is Life with Main Street. We are excited to be here, and this month's discussion is on protection. Now, in financial planning, protection can be addressed from all kinds of angles: asset protection, identity protection, income protection, life protection, and the list goes on. So, we've got a mailbag of questions to discuss with you today. Hopefully these will cover a lot of these different areas that you might be wondering about. So Jim, how about we dive in? But before we do that, how are you doing?
Well, Anna, I'm doing pretty good. Uh, where I am, in my home office in Las Vegas, it's very nice and warm today. In Monday, I'll be in New York in single digits. So, and then in Washington, D.C. and Maryland. So I will be getting winter, even though I'm trying to avoid as much as possible.
I am on the same plan as you are, but well, make sure you have warm clothes. I guess that's the the way to protect yourself. All right. Well, I have a question for you, so let's dive into it. Given that our Social Security system is going to be paying more than it receives by 2022, and according to the estimates that it will run out of money, we hear this a lot, by 2034. So how do we manage this kind of risk in terms of do we expect that the benefits will be reduced, and how does one plan their retirement income around this question?
Well, Anna, that's an issue that comes up frequently when we're discussing these financial planning topics with clients. Social Security, in their latest reports to the people that participate, says in the projected benefits that by 2034, we're only going to be able to pay you 75% of what's in this report. The 2022 figure is when the number of beneficiaries exceed the number of workers that are paying Social Security taxes in their W-2, 1099, self-employed taxes. So that is a issue that our Congress has kicked down the road year after year. The trustees of the Social Security Trust Fund keep telling Congress we're going to run out of money. There are a couple of things that Congress can do, which is increase the retirement age, which is normally 67 now, to age 70, because people are living longer. And when Social Security first came about, it was the average worker lived to be about 62, so they made it 65 for normal retirement. That's one fix. The other fix is make more of the benefit taxable. Some people pay no taxes on Social Security, some people pay half. The rest of the people pay 85% of their benefit is subject to income taxes. So there's a couple of fixes that Congress can do. But for the last dozen or so years, the Congress has waited till a crisis. I expect the same thing to happen. Social Security is one of three legs on a stool. We have people's savings, we have Social Security, and usually we have some other income streams. People that work for state and local government, school systems still have pensions. A few corporations still have pensions, but that's been the traditional way. So people need to take more responsibility, in my opinion, and assume Social Security will go down. If it doesn't, because the Congress changes things, and especially for people 55 or older, it's probably a very small risk. For younger people, it's a greater risk, and to only count on a partial Social Security payment. And if your financial plan works, then you're okay. Otherwise, you may have to work a little bit longer and save a little bit more to account for a reduced Social Security benefit.
Yes, and I think in our planning as well, we very much include those assumptions. Is that yeah, we can't rely 100% on our clients receiving the benefits. So we always kind of say we give you a little haircut going in, right? Because then that puts more pressure on us, right, as consumers, to say, all right, well, we got to get our act together and perhaps work longer or save up more so that we can get to our targeted goals. Well, great. So okay, we have a number of questions. You want to ask me one?
Yes. Uh, in the area of estate planning, what can you do for asset protection? And I assume that's asset protection from creditors.
Yes. So for most of our clients, that's not where that kind of a asset protection question relates to folks that are perhaps high earners or have bigger exposure. For example, I had clients the other day who sit on boards, and so they were concerned about, okay, well, if something happens, how do I make sure that my assets are protected? So there are tools that exist that could be part of your estate planning. One of them is perhaps irrevocable trusts, because various types of accounts, such as 403bs, IRAs, 401ks, have the layer of protection, right? But if you're looking for something beyond that, perhaps trusts that are irrevocable in nature, offshore trusts where you can put various assets could be utilized. Now, professional liability insurance is something to think about for your particular industry. And then, of course, I will talk a little bit more about this today as well, having enough umbrella liability insurance, which provides additional protection against creditors in case something goes off. Anything you want to add to the list, Jim?
Well, I think for most people, again, who are clients, offshore trusts or irrevocable trusts probably aren't useful, and they're very expensive to set up and maintain. So it's really not an issue that we deal with much. I'm dealing with one now that is pretty complicated, and we're dealing with trying to answer the question on the client: is it worth it for a very small degree of risk? Is 15 or 20,000 a year just to administer an offshore trust really worthwhile? So for most people, I wouldn't worry about that. I think if they have their assets covered by their umbrella policy and ERISA protected from creditor kind of accounts like 401ks, or in some places, 403bs and IRAs are limited to a certain limit, 500,000 or $1 million, and it goes by state. So you have to look at your state law, how much creditor protection you have. But I think most of our clients are in good shape. The chances of getting sued for huge amounts of money are pretty small unless somebody is notoriously negligent. That means they really intended to be a bad person. We don't have any clients like that I know of.
Yes, that's very true. Now, Jim, one of the things that comes up quite a bit, and we talk about this, right? Asset protection, right? Or when in financial planning, when we mention word protection, it sort of automatically goes in our heads to say, okay, well, I've got to protect what I've got. But I want to challenge our thinking and say, the biggest asset we all have is our abilities to earn income, right? And so what do we talk about with our clients when we talk about income protection? And why is that important?
Well, one of the examples I've given over the years is there is a machine, looks like an ATM in your garage, and you go out there once a month and you push a button and out comes that $7,000. That's pretty neat, isn't it? Would you
I do have one like that.
Would you insure that machine?
Oh, I would.
People respond by saying yes. Well, that machine is you, the ability to earn income. And it's usually covered if you work for a generous employer that provides disability insurance protection, and it's usually separated by short-term and long-term. And you can buy supplemental policies, private policies, for an additional amount, but usually insurance companies that provide the supplemental coverage, or actually a direct coverage if your employer doesn't provide it, they limit you to somewhere between 60 and 70% of your income, because they don't want to have a benefit that induces you to go out on disability.
Yes, and you probably would agree with me, but as many clients as we have and as many benefit booklets we review, it almost looks like everybody is somewhat underinsured, because you have to understand how, what happens with those 60 or 70, or if you're lucky, you can get 70% of your income, because you can never get 100, because that's what Jim said. It'll incentivize you to not have to go back to work. But you have to understand what happens with that benefit when you receive it, and who pays for it. So there's a lot of misconception, because clients say, oh yes, I've got the coverage, my employer pays for it, I'm good to go. Well, yes, you kind of are, but you have to think about, how does that affect that ATM machine that we're talking about? Will it be still spitting out $7,000, or will it only spit out $4,000? And then it also will have to give Uncle Sam, a cut of the taxes. And at the end of the day, you'll be like, well, I can't really quite live on that. So we have to think about the consequences of the benefits. Now, it is very possible these days. You don't have to work for an employer who offers those kinds of benefits. You can get those on your own. And we much more prefer, right, if we have an opportunity to have private policies, because guess what? They're not tied into your employer. So you can take them with you wherever you go, and you have those. There are also additional benefits. For example, one that we like very much is, think about this: when you can't work, right? So there is going to be income stream. If you had a disability policy, they will give you your 60%, or if you had 70%. But what happens to the savings, right, that you were doing along while you were earning 100% of your income? Well, that goes away. So with private policies, you can design them to provide additional benefits. For example, one that would allow those savings that you were doing before to continue on. Because if we're talking about long-term time of being disabled, that's a very long time for you to stop doing the savings that you were doing before. So it's like one of the features. There's many, many more, and only those are available through having private policies. So I like that very much, and I wanted to mention that as well. Now, I think short-term disability, particularly in California, right? We have the state disability that is available for everyone who pays into the fund up to 52 weeks. But a lot of times, I'd like to enforce the idea of having a really healthy emergency fund, right? If you have that, then perhaps you don't need to have, perhaps, right? It's not a direct recommendation, but you may think about whether you should carry a short-term disability, because it really is for, designed for short-term needs. So those are my two cents.
Okay, Anna, I would point out that one of the big considerations is, are your benefits going to be taxable or tax-free? If you pay with after-tax dollars, and some employers allow you to do that, then the benefits when you make a claim are income tax-free. Also, in the past, I've always concentrated on women of childbearing age to increase the minimum short-term disability to a longer period, especially during the financial planning process. They say, hey, we're thinking of having kids. So I like them to take advantage in advance, because usually there's a waiting period for short-term disability because you can't know you're having a child within the next 6 or 7 months and then apply for additional short-term disability. So there's usually a waiting period there. So that's the kind of thing that you have to plan for in advance.
Yes, and next time, I've had many examples, actually, a few. I had a personal example, somebody in my family. Next time you are being offered to sign up for a disability plan, please do that, especially if you're of childbearing age, because you never know when it happens, and then it's going to be too late. So yes, well, live and learn, right? So
those are the painful lessons that we're trying to avoid other people experiencing personally.
I know, that's true. That is very true. But I think our human nature is that way. We have to make enough of our own mistakes, then we'll know to listen to others. So, but we're here for you, right? All right, so we gotta get going, because we have a certain amount of time allotted. Talk about the other side of the protection, which has been pretty popular in terms of articles in the news, and with the recent Equifax breach, right? So the identity theft protection. Some clients are wondering, what is there in additional services, right, that you can purchase to help protect your identity, right? Is this something worth paying for, and what are we recommending for our clients, Jim?
Well, with Equifax, people, there was 144 million Americans, so everybody who had a credit card was affected. So if everybody's affected that has a credit card, gee, what's the risk? And it's all about risk and how you're going to cover that risk. You can freeze your credit, and that's what Equifax offered for free, but now you have to pay for it. There's third-party vendors like LifeLock is probably the most famous one, $1 million protection. But what is the risk? For credit cards, it used to be $50. Now it's zero. For all of the custodians of securities, they have SIPC up to 500,000, and most of them have a secondary kind of umbrella policy with Lloyd's of London, among other insurers. Banks have FDIC insurance. So most of the liability is gone away as long as the customer can demonstrate they did not abscond with their own assets. The only risk that I can assume, and this is not legal advice, this is practitioner advice, if you gave someone else, like my son, has a power of attorney for me that's effective right now. If my son came in and drained all my accounts, I have no recourse. But anybody else fraudulently grabbing any one of my assets in various places, I'm looking at zero liability. That doesn't mean that you can just stick your head in the sand like an ostrich. You have to look at your credit report, which is probably the most convenient tool to detect fraud. I calendar all of the 3 credit reporting agencies once every 4 months. I check on a different vendor to see what companies are reporting on me, because I think that's important to know if a new company is reporting on me that I didn't sign up for. The other thing you can do, and what I'm doing, is I have credit monitoring by creditkarma.com, that's free, and also mint.com, where I track all my expenses. They also have a unusual transaction reporting. So I have 2 free services that report unusual. I proactive on once every 4 months, taking a credit report. And you never know when someone offers you some free things. Unfortunately, the Office of Personnel Management, Target, Home Depot, Equifax, almost everything that comes up, unfortunately for me, I'm involved and I get free credit freeze for a year.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that anymore. So I think you have to be proactive. When it does happen to you, there are the Federal Trade Commission, FTC.gov. They have a checklist. It's happened to me. It took me about 2 hours worth of work, and I had to go down and file a police report, and that way I was protected. So 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was more onerous. We encourage everybody to have 2-factor authentication, which is a text message or an app on your smartphone to get another verification that it's really you when you're tapping into financially related accounts.
Yes, actually, I noticed this on the Vanguard site, and just this is kind of on that two-factor authentication, but you can actually set that up if you have accounts in Vanguard, and I think a lot of other custodians provide that as well.
There's no custodian that I know except for T. Rowe Price does not offer it. But
yes.
I have 11 different custodians, and I have it on 10 out of 11. And I wrote a letter to the president of T. Rowe Price saying, you could be at risk by not offering it because all of your competitors do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. All right. Well, it sounds like it's a proactive approach. Some people actually do go for purchasing those, additional tools, which is probably okay, right? But still, checking in once in a while and not having your head in the sand, as you said, Jim, does help a bit.
Anna, even if I had paid for that service, I still would have had to spend 2 hours notifying everybody and going down and filing a police report. So I really wouldn't have saved any time, and I would have just spent $150 a year that I really didn't need to spend.
Yeah, I do like that idea too. I want to be notified when something is off. I don't want to just blindly rely on some service that, yeah, like you said, it's just not a good use of your money. So might give you a false peace of mind. All right, we have probably 1 more minute, Jim, for one last question. So this is also discussed quite a bit in the Department of Protection, right? And we covered a little bit of this topic earlier. We all have insurance protection on our assets, right? Things like automobile insurance, homeowners, renters, right? We know that we are required, actually, to have those types of policies, right? So that's one step towards, okay, we want to make sure we have good coverage. The second step is just to figure out whether you have enough coverage. And as the job of financial planners is to look at those kinds of things, we do find frequently that our clients are somewhat underinsured in various areas. Sometimes the underinsured piece comes from the standpoint of, okay, you've got these policies, they all have good coverage, they provide everything that you need, but liability part of all of those policies might not be enough when we look at your assets, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to protect. If in the case of maybe having, if you had an auto accident and you were liable for, a very disastrous situation, and you had a certain amount of liability protection on your policy, but that was not enough to cover those damages. So the next step is something called umbrella liability policy, right? It really does, just the meaning of that term, it really does work like that. It sits on the top of the automobile coverage, it sits on top of the homeowners and renters, and it provides that additional extended protection. Now, it's very inexpensive to get for what it's worth, and it's usually sold in increments of 1 million. So do we recommend that? Yes, we do. Does everybody need it? Not necessarily. It really does depend on activities you're involved in, the types of assets you have, right? But perhaps it is something to think about if you haven't reviewed your liability protection on all of these policies. Anything you want to add, Jim?
It also has a few other features that your basic auto and homeowner policy don't have. Libel and slander are what always impresses me. And if you were of a mind to put something in writing about a famous person who might live in Washington, D.C., who has a propensity to sue people for libel, you would be covered under your umbrella policy, whereas you would not be covered under your basic homeowner plan. Something to think about.
Good. That's a good reminder. Okay. I don't think we have clients like that, but just in case. Just in case. All right.
This is a public video, so there could be non-clients looking or prospective clients.
I know. No, totally. Everyone is welcome. Well, I think that's a wrap for all the questions we had. If there's more that came up during our discussion, please let us know. We'll be happy to respond to them. But we'll see everybody next month. And it is February, so I guess happy Valentine's Day. That's all I've got. Jim, good hanging out with you. Take care and have a great weekend.
Thank you, Anna, and happy birthday.
Oh, thank you.